Hey, hello everyone. We're going to get started. Welcome to this town hall meeting on our D4 community shuttle study. Thank you all for taking the time from your schedules to join us this evening. I want to take a moment to recognize Jonathan Goldberg from Supervisor Encario's office, who is joining us today. Thank you for your time. My name is John Paul Velez. I am a principal planner with the Transportation Authority, and I'm joined by my colleagues Rachel Hyatt and Brittany Chan from the Transportation Authority, as well as George Tin, who will be providing translation in Cantonese. Should I pause there, George?
你好，多謝各位今晚嚟參加第四區嘅社區接駁車嘅研究會議。剛才説話嗰位呢，就叫做Sean Paul Vallis，佢就係呢個首席交通規劃師、技術政策技師同埋數據分析嘅。咁首先我哋要歡迎Jonathan Goldberg，佢係第四區嘅督察。今日亦都好榮幸佢參加我哋嘅會議。OK，
Yeah. So I guess, yeah, quickly to accept the Cantonese translation, you will see a globe in the toolbar at the bottom when the interpretation begins. So click on that globe icon and select Cantonese. And please also mute the original audio on that menu. Okay, and I think that has begun. So I will carry on. If you have any questions during the presentation, please free to put them in the chat box or in the Q&A at the bottom of the screen. And you can also ask questions to us directly during the two discussion sections that we have scheduled in our program today. Okay, so here's our agenda for today. It includes a general overview of our project, a report back on our findings from our first round of outreach, a presentation of our proposed service design that will be our first discussion topic. And then we'll have a second discussion topic, which is the potential implementation and funding strategies. And after that, we'll wrap up with, again, a brief discussion of next steps. Before we launch into the presentation itself, I want to see, Jonathan, if you would like to make any brief remarks.
Sure. Thank you, John Paul. Thank you, everyone. I see some familiar names and faces. I want to thank everyone for taking the time to be here this evening. We are eager and interested to hear back the findings that the CTA will be presenting tonight, and look forward to learning more.
Great. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you.
Okay, so on with our presentation. And so we'll begin with an overview of the project. An on-demand shuttle, you may have also heard the term a microtransit. It's a kind of transit service that operates without a fixed route or without a fixed schedule. Instead, the service operates within a given service area. So for instance, there's already a service of this kind that operates in the Bayview neighborhood, which is actually pictured here, the services, the vehicles that are using. So what you see normally is that customer request rides on demand through their phones, similarly to how you do it to get an Uber or a Lyft. And you may have to share rides with other folks traveling in a similar direction. The idea of an on-demand shuttle for District 4 was recommended by the D4 mobility study that was completed in 2021. That study suggested this type of service could help improve transit options for local trips within D4, improving access to commercial corridors and other key destinations was also identified as a key need, as well as improving options for seniors and people with disabilities. This study takes guidance from that D4 mobility study, and in turn looks to develop a service design that addresses those needs that have been identified, as well as potential strategies for implementation and fundings for that service. We do so by looking at best practices nationwide, by consulting with you, the D4 community, and through our own technical work and analyses. So now let's look back at our first round of outreach and what we learned during that process. Again, today this meeting is the beginning of our second phase of outreach. The first phase of outreach took place in the fall of 2023. At the time, we asked about the type of service that you'd like to see implemented, what would be the key features, and what would be the priorities for the community for that service. We received over 800 responses to our survey, and we also held focus group discussions with the community leaders, from organizations listed here. Now, what did we learn? So firstly, we confirmed what we had heard in the D4 mobility study. You say basically we saw that you want to use this service to go to local shopping and local restaurants within D4, within District 4. That is the primary use that folks mentioned. Oh, there was also an interest in getting to parks and open spaces. That was another popular answer. You can see here on the left some quotes from our focus groups also confirming that desire, that potential use. Other critical features that we identified through the survey are as follows. We know that on weekdays, you would like to use the service since very early in the morning, as early as 6 a.m., and then also late in the evening, so as late as 9 p.m. On weekends, the need for the service seems to be less lengthy, kind of more reduced hours from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., not as early. You also said that you would be comfortable waiting between 10 to 20 minutes for the service to actually come pick you up upon request, and that you'd be comfortable traveling for anywhere between 20 to 30 minutes in the vehicle. And you said that you think the fare you'd like to see implemented would be the standard muni fare of $3 per passenger trip, and you prefer to pay it through your Clipper cards. Okay. Excuse me. Overall, what we saw through our survey is that there was great interest in the community in seeing this service implemented, with 60% of survey respondents indicating that they would use the surveys once a week or more. With all of that input, as well as our own technical analyses and review of best practices, we've developed the following service design. The service that we're proposing would operate in the whole of District 4, plus the Galleria Mall SFSSU area. So basically, the boundaries for this service area would be Lincoln Way to the north, the Great Highway to the west, 19th Avenue to the east, and then in the south, Holloway, Lake Merced, and Sloat Boulevards to the south. The service, we're thinking, as described before, will operate between 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. to give those folks traveling at 9 p.m. some additional time to arrive. Again, on the weekdays, and then 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. on weekends. In terms of the trip experience, in terms of how you request the trip, you request the service through a smartphone app by calling a multilingual call center. On average, you would have to wait between 10 to 20 minutes. So you can wait at home for a while or at your restaurant or your shopping location before actually heading out to hail the vehicle. Most folks would be asked to actually go to the nearest intersection to get picked up by the vehicle, not the actual door of their house, but for seniors and for people with disabilities, actual door-to-door service would be implemented. Now, once you get into the vehicle, you would pay your fare as you get onto the vehicle, regular muni fares and transfers as described before, $3, and other applicable discounts would apply. And then you would travel for anywhere between 15 to 25 minutes, and you may pick up other people along the way that are going in a similar direction before getting dropped off at the nearest intersection near your destination. Or you could also be transferring to hop on Muni to go elsewhere in the city. In terms of the benefit, our estimation is that this service would be used by about 200 people per day on average. We think that the service would allow people faster travel by transit within District 4 compared to what the current options are. And we think that by doing so, we could help improve mobility for seniors, for people with disabilities, as well as we could also help ease some of the congestion that we see in the neighborhoods of District 4, as well as the burden on the existing parking supply. So we arrive now at our first discussion point. So our question to you is, what do you think of this proposed service design? Does it respond to community needs and desires? So please chime in.
And folks are welcome to use the raise hand feature or drop any thoughts in the chat, or feel free to unmute and speak as well.
If there's also any point of clarification of what we've shared so far, please go ahead.
Okay, I see Margaret's hand up.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm particularly concerned with seniors and people with disabilities. And you talk about the pickup that may potentially be door to door. But then when you talk about the drop off, you talk about it being at an intersection. Would there be a possibility to have a more direct drop off for the seniors and people with disabilities? I'm thinking particularly those who are mobility challenged with either a wheelchair or a walker. And let's just say they're going to the medical building over at Stonestown.
Yeah, no. So I think maybe I didn't communicate that clearly, but for people with disabilities and for seniors, the service would operate door to door. So no, not to the nearest intersection. The nearest intersection would be for the rest of the users.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Thanks, Margaret. Next hand I see is Alice.
Hi, my name's Alice. I guess you said that. I'm wondering sort of if this discussion is going to get into the cost for this project and how much it would cost to run this project versus like increasing frequency on the 18 or extending the 18 so it hits the Daly City BART, increasing frequency on the 29, or like the 7 ends at 10, having it end at midnight now, or bringing back the express service on that to sort of make sure that our transportation network is connected with the rest of the city, and then also using funds to improve the paratransit services that exist already so that they're dedicated services for people who need that door-to-door service, and hopefully make it more frequent than having to call a day in advance.
There's some of those questions that we will address later, like we will share the cost, but some of the options or alternatives to addressing the challenges that we're trying to address uh, are not as thorough in terms of kind of considering all of those options. The task at hand was to address more of the designing of the service, which the community had already identified as a priority. But subsequent opportunities for that conversation are welcome as well.
Answer your question.
Hi. Sorry, I couldn't hear Brittany if you said something, but I'm just going to jump in.
Okay, feel free to.
Hi, folks. My name is Lily. I'm with the Sunset Chinese Cultural District, and wanted to thank you for this presentation today. I think it's a long time coming that, we want more mobility throughout the Sunset. Full transparency, I've also been I've visited the Bayview and saw how their shuttle system works, which I thought was actually really cool for the Bayview to connect folks out to 3rd Street. For the Sunset, I do wonder first and foremost always language access. Um, how are your apps running? Is it also translated? Are the drivers also bilingual? Like, what does all of that look like, especially for a more monolingual Chinese? Regarding the app, just wondering, like, I didn't get to see the app, but wondering how simple it is because a lot of our elders just need a little bit more assistance in learning how to use new technology. So wondering how simple it is for elders to learn. And then I also saw the last one is I saw that there was a suggestion to match the cost to Muni, which I think makes sense. And I assume that that also means that youth would ride free and seniors would ride free. But I also wonder about the transfer to Muni. Like if I, as a regular paying adult, pay on this app, would I have to pay again on Muni, or is it that I can continue my trip on Muni without having to pay additionally?
A lot of questions. Let me see if I can cover them all, but let me know if I miss one. I think in general, yeah, the idea is that the app is probably going to be in English, and it will be designed in an accessible way, but it might still be a burden for some folks to actually use the app. And so that's why we also have the call center as an alternative option for kind of requesting the services. And so that the call center would also offer different languages, not only English, to make the service more accessible to a broader segment of the D4 community. In terms of the drivers, I don't think that the drivers necessarily will of the bad, the design is not to have multilingual drivers, but it's an interesting point of feedback, and it's something that we can kind of incorporate into further steps to assess kind of what impact having that kind of level of skill in our drivers have in the costs of the service. And then finally, yes, the main form of payment is actually not through the app, but through just a regular Muni card. So all of the transfer fares that you use for general travel within Muni to BART and whatnot would apply and would be available by using the service as well. Did I get all of those, or is the one missing?
Yeah, you got them. Thanks.
Great.
Anyone else has any questions, feel free to unmute or raise your hand or drop them in the chat.
I have another one. This is Margaret. And piggybacking a little bit off of Lily's questions, at least the accompanying photos that were with the presentation, it looks like they were using something that looks vaguely like a phone to record the Muni as clipper or whatever as people board, but is there also going to be an allowance that people could pay in cash if need be? Because we may have some people who do not use the clippers.
Yeah, that's a possibility. For the moment being, there is no that option is not incorporated into the service design. You know, sometimes having cash payments requires additional insurance and kind of puts other burdens on
Uh-huh.
the service provision. But again, this is the opportunity to kind of have conversations with the community to see if that is a priority that folks want to see incorporated into future kind of design iterations for the service. So we'll note it here. And I understand and I agree that again certain folks don't have access to again regularly to pay via Muni or through the Muni smartphone app. But I think that the ways that in which kind of other folks have approached that challenge is to just be out in the community and know who in the local community might have that burden and facilitate their access to a Clipper card and in a kind of proactive way. That's a way of maybe solving for that gap a little bit, not in the whole, but at least a certain percentage.
I agree, it would be a small percentage, but I'm thinking of the seniors again, and they have a tendency to lose the card.
Mm,
And yet they still need to get to the doctor on time, and there isn't time to get a new card. And
yeah.
I'm just trying to think of the alternative for that situation, which admittedly would be small.
No, that's a great point, and I think something to consider as we move forward with the project. Thank you. I see
Another
some,
question.
yeah.
So in the Sunset, we actually have several schools and high schools. So it looks like within the geographic areas, you'll have at least Lincoln and Lowell within those areas, as well as SF State. So just wondering if you guys have considered or thought about the impact of like the students using it more frequently, because I can totally see students after school taking it home for a more direct route instead of going around, and just wondering like if you guys have any plans on that or what it looks like, because I know Bayview has just the two shuttles and it takes a little while. So assuming that like, 2,000 kids get off of school at the same time and even like 10% or 1% of them decides to try to use this. Um, I don't know if you guys have any impacts in the Bayview in the same way.
I can't speak to all the details of the implementation of the Bayview service, but in general, the use from kind of students of the service has been incorporated. Like roughly, we're thinking about 5 to 6 vehicles operating at the same time, and I think that this type of service has the flexibility to add more vehicles if the demand proves to be there. Uh, so maybe one like for a while there's a little bit of a bottleneck if there's a challenge identified in addressing kind of a surge in demand, but there's flexibility to maybe address that moving forward. So uh, the hope is that it's a service that has an impact in the community and so if students gravitate towards it, we would see that as a success.
And then do you have an age limit? Like if an elementary school student were to hop on because their parents think it's safer, could they get on by themselves, or is there a cap?
We haven't identified a specific age limit, but I guess yeah. So normally someone that has access to a cell phone and can hail trips through that mechanism is a little bit of the kind of unofficial boundary, but we could develop policies to have that more fixed moving forward. Do we have any questions in the chat? I mean, I didn't know. Okay. Well, I guess before we move on, I'm going to ask all of you to please type yes or no in the chat whether you feel that this service responds to community needs, the community needs that we identified through our outreach last year. Are they being represented in this service design that we've presented and different features that we've shared? So could you please kind of let us know on the chat? Thank you, Margaret. I only see her answer. Maybe some folks are on the move, but could anyone else chime in? Okay. All right, see another response. Well, feel free to continue answering as we move on to kind of our second section of the presentation. Okay, so now we move on to discussing implementation and funding
Sorry,
along the line.
do you
Oh,
guys hear me?
yes.
Oh, this is Albert Chatter. Sorry, I would just like to say yes. I couldn't quite get the chat working, so
No,
count as a yes. Thank
thank
you.
you, Albert. That's helpful. I appreciate you taking the time. Okay, great. So yeah, so implementation and funding. So again, the now this part of the presentation tries to discuss how we move the service design from a concept into actual reality, into an actual service that is operating on District 4 streets. So again, I think Alice was wondering about this. Given the service parameters that we've shared, the number of the hours of operation, the number of vehicles that we project we're going to be needed to address, provide the level of service that we've targeted, that we heard from you, you want to see implemented, and looking at how much it costs to deploy one of these services, and again, the Bayview shuttle being an important reference point for us. We are thinking that implementing this service for a year would cost between 3 to 3.5 million. So again, that's a significant amount of money, particularly in our current context where funding for transit is actually limited. So our recommendation is that the service is launched as a pilot first to make sure that the demand for the service is actually there, and for that service to prove that it will have a positive impact on the community before a commitment to implementing the service on a permanent basis is considered and explored more thoroughly. Now, securing funding for the service is really one of the key challenges to moving forward. After our review, we think that sources of funding for the pilot could include grants or discretionary funding from the state government, There will also be San Francisco government funds. I also think that we would need some form of funding from the D4 community, as well as the actual revenues, leveraging their net revenues from service users. Now, in order to transition from a permanent service to transition from a pilot service to a more permanent long-term service that is no longer a pilot, we would need to actually find a dedicated source of funding because grants and some of those discretionary funding sources that we just mentioned would no longer be available for long-term implementation. So here we zoom in a little on those local sources of funding to give you a better sense of what we think in terms of how the service could be funded. So for example, in terms of funding from the San Francisco government, which would typically cover the lion's share of the cost of this service, we think that one option to consider could be to have this service, this project included in a future revenue measure seeking funding for transportation initiatives. So that would be one way to kind of securing long-term funding for the project. A different approach could be redirecting current funding from some of the existing local transit options available on District 4 to this on-demand shuttle. So that's a way, instead of generating a new source, shifting the use of available sources. Now, in terms of funding from the D4 community, which would be a smaller piece of the pie, not the lion's share as the ones listed above, we're thinking that this could come from advertising, from sponsorships, or contributions from local businesses. We are also thinking you could consider adopting some development fees, that kind of, as they bring kind of more folks to the D4 community, then they also kind of help support people's ability to travel within D4 by supporting local transit services through a small fee. Or similarly, there's the idea that the potential of having an local increase only within District 4 of parking fees that would be redirected to supporting this service. This idea is called typically a parking benefit district. So it's another option that could be considered to support the deployment of this service. And then finally, there's the alternative to actually pay more than the standard muni fare to cover for more of the costs through fare revenues. So just for a general sense of the numbers here, like, at $3 per passenger, this would be a very heavily subsidized service. It would cost way more than $3 to actually provide this service per passenger. And even if we double that service to 6, it would still be a heavily subsidized service, just slightly less. But again, when funding is uncertain, every penny counts. And so we were thinking of different options of coupling the big piece together. So that's another approach that, again, the community could consider. So we're here now at our second discussion item. And so again, it's a very open question. We're interested to hear from you. How do you prioritize funding sources for this revenue? What makes sense to you? What mix of options seems to be the best fit in your opinion to seeing this service moving forward? I see while other folks gonna maybe prepare their questions, I see Albert's question on the chat. He's asking, how much would parking fees go up theoretically? How many shuttles in the fleet for District 4? So yeah, I think that overall the fleet would be, we think we need top 6 vehicles at the peak period. So you need to deploy all of the vehicles all of the time, but we're thinking 6, 4 to 6. Generally operating. Now, how much do parking fees would need to go up? Again, that's just an option, and 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 I think that's something that is much a question to you than to us. I think that the idea could be, again, this is just a suggestion, that yeah, maybe an increase by, who knows, 15-20% in parking fares could then be coupled into the larger kind of pie of different funding mechanisms to see this service implemented long term. Maybe the pilot could happen without again these local sources of funding, but definitely longer term would be critical for it. I see Lily has a question on the chat, but I think I saw Margaret raise her hand first. So Margaret, I'm going to pass it on to you before I talk to we address Lily's question.
Thank you. Your service users are actually part of District 4. So when you talk about increasing fares, that applies to everyone in the community. It might be, well, let me propose with the increased fares, which seniors pay full force, and at the risk of being very unpopular, school kids pay as well.
Mm.
This is a special kind of service. And I certainly would hope that, especially for seniors, it wouldn't be that much of an increase. But it is, a door-to-door is very special. And that is a consideration that is above and beyond anything you would get by going out and walking the blocks to the Muni stops.
Mm.
So I think it would, in my mind, in a fairness, I think the extra that you get by having someone come to your street corner or to your door warrants a little extra pay.
That's fair. Thank you for sharing that perspective. Okay. No, I mean, yeah. I think right now, like the purpose of this section of today's meeting is just to hear you out, ideas, approaches, what questions do these uh potential approaches that we're suggesting kind of, generating you guys' minds. So I think that that's an interesting and very valid perspective. Now, moving to the chat, Lily's question is, what's the total estimate of how much this would cost? So yeah, maybe I blew through that too fast. It was one of the prior slides, but we're thinking anywhere from 3 to 3.5 million per year. Did I skip that? But I think it's here. And yeah, so our reference point is again other service or other transit properties that have implemented the service, but we're especially focused on what we're seeing in Bayview, because again it uses San Francisco costs and or that is reflective of our local context. Was that it, Lily? Does that address your question? That's just for a 1 year implementation. I guess I'll clarify that after the actual implementation of the service, if it's to be continued, then there are not as many implementation costs, and so you just have to pay the operating costs, and there would be a reduction in that annual rate.
Yeah, I asked the question because I'm looking at the examples of where you could raise money and just trying to think like, would advertising get you the amount needed, you know? I hesitate to put any additional burden on our business corridors because a lot of these are smaller businesses, mom and pop kind of stuff, and I wouldn't want them to pay extra when they're already on pretty thin margins, especially after COVID. But I'm just not convinced on like a special use district or anything else because it just takes taxes from the local people to add to this. Yeah,
Yeah.
I struggle with that concept, but the total amount doesn't seem like a ton, so it feels like it could be done in many ways.
Yeah, that's valid. And I think again, those are here what we have in front of us in this slide and the next, I mean, the slide is the same, but with the information on the slide is the same, but just with the question. I think the thinking is that, you know, here are again a menu of options and we need to explore what is available to us and then how can all of these be pieced together. So right now, part of some of these trade-offs, some of these costs would be kind of on the D4 community, as Margaret was kind of suggesting. There's a benefit, but there might be some, again, trade-offs to receiving that benefit. It could be increasing the fares, or it could be, again, different forms of the community maybe helping see this project move forward. But that being said, like I think that the concept is still that the lion's share of the funding needs to come from some of these San Francisco government sources or something larger, like you. I think we're on the same page with your thinking that the the ad revenues would not suffice either to really kind of see this project implemented. I see Albert has raised his hand, but I also had seen these questions from Melanie. So let me see. Apologies for missing part one of the presentation, but is this only being considered as a door-to-door service? So no, the answer is no. Door-to-door will only be offered to seniors and people with disabilities. Or is there an option to have shuttles run to business districts that otherwise are challenging to get to via Muni? So yeah, I guess there's no the concept doesn't have kind of semi routes in any way, shape, or form. It's anywhere within District 4, basically, any origin, any destination, you can book your travel through um, with the service app. There are options to actually include within the app. We've seen this in other places. The ability to see if there's a Muni service that actually existing Muni service that provides a good service uh, to that origin destination pair and might make that trip no need to really use the service in that case. Yeah, and so there's a lot of kind of nuances to maybe making sure that this service is a complement to existing transit services rather than competing with what's already available. And then what is the estimated true cost per ride, assuming riders pay a standard uni fare? And so, well, that will depend on the final costs, but it could be somewhere in the $20 or so per passenger trip. Somewhere around that neighborhood, if not higher. Okay, so Albert, on to you.
Hey there, Jean Paul. Yeah, I was just wondering, like, this seems expensive for just D4, you know, 3.5 million. I don't know how, you're saying 6 vehicles. What if we were to disseminate that wider to a wider area? Would that make more sense? You know, just looking at cost per unit this way.
Yeah, that makes all the sense, and I think that the challenge there is that if you have the same amount of vehicles but in a wider area, then potentially where you're impacting is how quickly the vehicle come to pick you up, or how long it may take you, how many on the vehicle. So these are all options to the community that can be adjusted to maybe kind of lower the full final cost or extend the service to a broader community, because to keep the same level of service within an expanded service area potentially may require additional vehicles. And so so we'd have to kind of play that game a little bit. It's not as direct.
Would,
Go
would
ahead.
this is state or federal subsidizing any of this funding?
Well, yeah, so I guess that's part of what we're suggesting, yes, that there would be potentially some type of grant funding for the pilot. So I guess a one-time kind of grant to see the service implemented. But then longer term, we think that the funding, the subsidies would come from the San Francisco government, most likely. Again, this is not, all of this is potential, hypothetical. None of these sources are secure right now. We're just identifying what would be the more viable approach to seeing the service implemented. Where did the funding for the Baby Shuttle project come from? Did riders pay an increased fare? Did the local business contribute in some way? So, so the Baby Shuttle is currently implemented primarily through a grant from the state government. And so they're in that kind of there's in that pilot phase. They ran the service for a few months for free. And as of, I believe, April, they started charging the standard Muni fare on the service. I do not think that the local community contributed to that funding just yet. And I think precisely some of the questions that I guess will need to be answered for Baby as well as future. If this service continues to be a success, then how is it going to be implemented? Yeah, and I guess Jovan, who is our colleague from the SFMTA and kind of manages the Baby project, just introduced himself on the chat. And so I don't know if you, Jovan, anything else you would like to add to my answer on your kind of funding sources?
Yeah, hi everybody. Javon Garcia, project manager for the Bayview Shuttle. Not too much to add. Yeah, our current funding source is from the California Air Resources Board. So that is fully funding the Bayview Shuttle as of now. I will add something that the Bayview community is uniquely positioned to apply for the STEP grant available through CARB because it's identified at the state level as a disadvantaged community. That is a community that faces inequitable or is low income, also has inequitable environmental harms done to it, things of that nature. And so that made it kind of a unique community to apply for that grant. And then just to add something else, I think there were some earlier comments related to kind of our service design and fare structure. So we do our current fares, as Jean-Paul said, were introduced in April. It is comparable pricing to Muni. And our service right now operates with 6 fleet vehicles. So happy to answer any other questions in the chat or connect offline as well.
Thank you, Joanne. So Alice has her hand raised. Alice?
Hi, thank you, Jean-Paul. I had a question. You mentioned that the 3.5 million was more for the first year and that it would be different in later years. Did I understand that correctly? And if
Correct.
so, what would you expect being like the ongoing annual cost?
More around, I guess if it's 3.5, then around 3 million. If it's 2.5. So I would say like about 500K of sort of like are the roughly estimated of implementation costs.
So 3 million would be the sort of average annual cost.
Well, we have again a little bit of that kind of bandwidth that we're operating, but yeah, I would answer it a different way that we estimate that the implementation costs are about 500,000, and depending on some of the kind of decisions about service design, the actual operating cost is the one that may vary a little bit. But yeah, so if you're going to think of it as 3 million for general operations per year plus 500 for implementation. That's the higher end of the cost. I will kind of give you that heads up, or it would be the conservative assessment of the cost.
Okay.
I guess new message. Albert, how big is the Baby ridership? I think I'll defer maybe to Javon to answer that on the chat. In the meantime, Alice, you still have your hand up. Do you have any questions, or that was okay? No longer. Thank you. And then Margaret.
No, I just took it down. I did just lower my hand. I'm sorry. Somebody
Okay,
answered my question.
No pressure. No pressure. Okay. Well, we don't have any kind of specific kind of question like the last one where we're asking you say if you could just say yes or no on the chat. Because this is a more give us your feedback, give us your thinking. I will just again highlight that we think that there are some trade-offs. I appreciate Javon clarifying kind of the difference in the ability of the Weibo community versus the D4 community in terms of accessing some of these grants. And so this is why we're thinking that we need to get a little more creative in terms of finding sources of funding if we want to see this service implemented. And again, that may include trade-offs for the D4 community if we want to see the service implemented.
Excuse me, it's Margaret again. I remembered my
What?
question. My question is, has anybody looked into the offset potentials on this? Because if we are going to use a shuttle service within the District 4 all the way to Stonestown and whatever, that's going to take some load off of the Muni.
Mhm.
And I kind of have a dread in the back of my mind that the next thing that's going to come out is a reduced Muni service for our area, which would not make me happy. But I'm just saying, wouldn't there be an offset by that reduced reliance on Muni
We don't
in
know.
terms of finances?
So, well, I
Because
guess the way that I would say is that we are not proposing to have any changes to existing Muni service while the service is being piloted. So that's kind of level one. Uh, for instance, we're kind of looking closely at what's happening in the Bayview to see if there's any changes in Muni using patterns that with the launch of the Bayview shuttle service that again may suggest that a different strategy is required, but it seems that the sound approach and kind of the best practice that we've seen from other transit properties is to just launch the service as an additive and make kind of decisions about uh, again whether the finances and whether I think that the goal number one is to sustain a level, a quality standard of mobility for all of the community. And if there's such redundancy that maybe there's opportunities to then kind of shift some funding, then those could be addressed in a later stage, but perhaps not off the bat because that assumption, I guess we would rather see it realized first in practice before service we were to recommend service cuts or something of that kind. Okay. Well, I see that we're almost at time. So I'm going to share quickly some of our next steps. I think yeah, well, again, thank you all for a very insightful discussion. I appreciate everyone's kind of feedback and ideas. Again, we're going to continue this round of outreach through a few weeks in the month of July. So if you have any additional thoughts you'd like to share, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We will provide our contact information in a second or just to the TA at large. And we're eager to kind of hear from you and we're interested in all of your ideas as we kind of ramp up to again, closing first is outreach phase, the second round of outreach, and then moving forward to again wrapping up, finalizing a report that we would bring to the Transportation Authority Board at some time in the fall this year. So again, thank you, Brittany. I see that you put our email address on the chat, and it's also here now on your screen. So again, please use that, and we would love to hear from you if you have any additional thoughts. Again, today it was just kind of our hope was to give you a briefing on where the project is at, the progress that we made over the last few months, and to kind of hear from you about again our service, what we're thinking about funding before we put it in a more formal report format. But again, we're available and we'd love to hear from you. That's all on our side. Any final questions, thoughts before we adjourn? Okay. With that being said, thank you all for your time. Really appreciate it. Everyone's participation, taking time from your schedules to join us and helping us with sharing your feedback today. I thought it was a very insightful conversation. Thank you all. Have a good one. Good evening, everyone.